Watching the Sparks Fly is a podcast about driving innovation from the inside out, where we talk to the people who create positive change around themselves one day at a time. It's brought to you by the folks over at Stella Source, where we're on a mission to make metal simple. All episodes are recorded live in the Next Tech studio in Birmingham, Alabama. Did you know? According to research from Future Market Insights, the global steel market is expected to surge to over $2.9 trillion by 2033. That would be roughly 4.4% annual growth, up from $1.8 trillion in 2022. At the same time, research from PwC shows that 47% of metals industry executives consider innovation a competitive necessity. But metals companies lag well behind other industries, spending only 7.25% of their budget on innovation. Hi, this is Watching the Sparks Fly, and I am Donnie Garvich. This is a podcast where we dig into what it takes to innovate in industries or organizations that are resistant to change. The only way to do it is from the inside out. And today I am joined by two people who have spent their careers working to innovate in industries that are resistant to change. Stephen Armstrong, Wes Spencer, welcome. Appreciate you being here.
Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Would love to start with maybe some introductions as to what keeps you busy during your days now. We'll go back in history some, and we'll talk about what has kept you busy in the past. But what do you do today that keeps you busy? We'll start with you, Stephen.
Sure. Well, now I am the Executive Vice President at O'Neill Industries, and I have responsibility for our industrial metals group of companies, which is comprised of O'Neill Steel, O'Neill Manufacturing Services, and Lico Steel. And really, my day now is spent looking out into the future from a strategic standpoint. What do we need to be focused on? What are the areas we need to invest in? What is the culture we need to develop in our companies? And really less tactical day-to-day activities.
So you're looking at a whole portfolio of organizations and saying, hey, where do we want to go
exactly
as a group?
Exactly.
Okay, great. Wes, what about you?
Wes Spencer, Vice President of Product here at Stella Source and Partnerships. Really day-to-day, I feel like I go up, down, left, and right at times.
I can confirm that. I've watched you do that quite often, yeah.
So I'd like to spend a ton of time on the future. How do we develop software products that take people's businesses to places that they're not today? Right. That's exciting. Then I will drop down and explain some very basic math applied in very abstract concepts to people who are helping deliver on that. Then it may be understanding things about technology that I don't yet understand and need the context to. So it's kind of runs the gamut day to day, but essentially just thinking all day, all night about how technology can help deliver solutions for people in the metals industry that need them. And, I heard something interesting just last week. A lot of our customers may be, call it problem unaware, right? So helping overcome the positioning of what problems may be solvable that people have never imagined before with technology.
So when you say that, you're really talking about a world where there are problems, and if you're outside that world, you may observe those problems, but people kind of in the world may not see that as necessarily a problem just because that's the way things are. Yeah,
so I think it might be unfair, it's certainly unfair to say people from the outside look at the steel industry and have all the solutions. That's absolutely not true.
Sure.
I mean, things exist for a pretty good set of reasons at times, but I don't think that the participants in the metals industry as a whole have been presented with opportunities to understand how solutions can meet needs that they hadn't actually perceived yet, or pain points that people have just become so accustomed to living with that, they've never imagined what it could be to not have to do a certain thing a certain way every single day.
Yeah, it's the pot roast issue. If you've ever heard it, right? Where, girl's watching her mom make a pot roast. She cuts the ends off the roast, puts it in the pot, right? Many years later, her daughter's watching her make a pot roast. She cuts the ends off the roast, puts it in the pot. The daughter says, Mom, why did you cut the ends off the roast? She said, I'm not sure. My mom always did it. She goes to her mom, why did you cut the ends off the roast, right? But she's like, I'm not sure. I'm going to ask my mother, right? So you're a great-grandmother now. And she goes, well, because my pot wasn't big enough. And no one ever stopped to question. And that's there's a lot of industries who kind of share that. We've done it this way. It's been successful, to a large degree. And I think that's part of what we want to make sure we cover today. So in an industry, and today we're going to be talking about kind of specifically, it's not the only subject, but really the metals industry and the metal service industries we're kind of talking about. And if I'm not mistaken, that's where you two met, right? You two know each other, and that's kind of where y'all met, right? So give me a bit of just a quick history of how y'all met, and then I want to get into kind of, Stephen, some of the history of like how you got introduced to that industry, and then you as well, Wes.
I actually thought about it this morning. My first day, if you remember Norm Browning.
I do remember Norm.
How can you forget Norm? The best laugh in the entire industry. No, so I show up for work day one, and Norm was like, "Hey, you know Microsoft Excel, right?" And of course, I'm like, "Sure, like I can fire it up." He's like, "Here, come meet Stephen." And so this was like an hour in, and you guys were in the early stage of evaluating not you guys, but we were in the early stage of evaluating outsourcing some trucking to a big third-party logistics company. And it was the early phase of, do we keep it in-house or do we take it outside? Really in preparation for, I guess, CSA 2010 at the time. And so that was, day one, met Stephen probably an hour in.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what were you doing at the time, Stephen? What was your role?
I am trying to remember. So that would have been, what year was that?
2010.
So 2010, I was probably, my title at that point was VP of Business Administration.
Okay.
So I had responsibility for accounting, finance, IT, HR, data analytics, those roles.
Excellent.
And I do remember that. We were looking at partnering with a third-party logistics company, and we were doing a lot of analysis that we needed help with.
I'd never seen a spreadsheet with 300,000 lines on it before.
Yeah, I have a feeling on day one when someone says, "Do you know Excel?" that the answer is, if you're asking me on day one, I probably don't know it to the degree that you're asking, right? Because can I fire it up? I mean, you're eager, right? Like, yeah, I can, sure.
I was nervous to answer.
I know Excel, and then someone throws an Excel sheet at you, and you're like, I thought I knew Excel.
Yeah, that's about it.
So
that was really our first culture change within O'Neill Steel, was
Excel?
developing the use, enabling all our people to use Excel to get the data they needed and how they wanted it.
That's fascinating. So take me back, Stephen, when we talk about the metals industry, and I've mentioned this in a conversation previously. When we talk about the metals industry, I come from the software world, right? And I've been through a lot of different companies. Mm-hmm. When you're in software, a lot of times your skills are considered transferable to different industries. And as a result of that, you go from one industry to another. So you might move from finance to insurance to legal, right? You can just go e-commerce, retail, you move all around. The metals industry was a pretty significant diversion from the habit of coming into industries and learning the nouns and verbs of those industries. So the metals industry, for anyone kind of uninitiated, the metals industry is a very complex, very effective, very efficient industry. And there's a lot of knowledge that goes into that being true. And really, in my estimation, the only way to get that knowledge is to immerse yourself in doing the things that the metals industry does, right? There's not a way to get it outside of doing it. And so I would be curious, Stephen, when you came into the metals industry, give us an idea of when that was. Mm-hmm. So this is post, I guess Auburn, right? So War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Post that, right? You're out in the world, you're doing something. You get introduced to the metals industry. Walk me through what that was like and kind of the time frame of that.
So it really happened accidentally.
Okay.
So it was 2006. I was a double E out of Auburn, spent 10 years in telecommunications. And in telecommunications, I worked in a number of different roles. I was an engineer for a period of time. I was an installation and maintenance supervisor for a period of time. So I had, at 23 years old, was given 28 technicians that very clearly told me they all had more years service than I had age.
Which was probably true, right?
Which was exactly true, but it was trial by fire. I got to learn how to manage people and deal with a bunch of different personalities. From there, I moved into finance. I moved into marketing. And then finally, I ended my career there in strategic pricing. All those roles were really around data analytics. How do we use information to make better decisions?
Now, was that as a result of you just kind of, data was something you happen to enjoy and were good at and could apply yourself to?
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, it just kind of, there was a gentleman in finance that his goal was to hire engineers into the financial organization at Bell South.
Yep.
And let them go and use data and make decisions. And ultimately, I was writing models in Excel of how I could raise your price to the next whole dollar or without going to the next whole dollar. So at that point, they had 17 million residential phone lines. We had about 5 or 6 charges we could manipulate.
Yep.
And no one raised the or complained if your bill didn't go to the next whole dollar. So whether you paid $32.01 or $32.99, nobody said a word. And so I was trying to squeeze a quarter out of 17 million phone lines a month, and decided that was not fulfilling. That was not, while not illegal, it just didn't feel good.
Yep.
I was not adding value to anything, and started the process of looking for a new job. Very early in that, I was introduced to the CFO at O'Neill Steel at the time, a lady named Mary Valenta. We hit it off. The things she wanted to bring to the metals industry around how do we use information and data to make better decisions? How do we really take a fresh look at our business from a new perspective? All was fascinating to me. And she literally called me the next day and said, why don't you come work here? I don't know what your title will be. I don't know what your job will be, but we'll figure it out.
We'll have some cool problems.
And I said, let's do it. So it was the people that excited me about the metals industry. Everybody I met that day with her, they were just great people.
Yeah,
they
to a
wanted
person,
to solve them.
I would support that. To a person, the people I've met in the metals industry have been fantastic.
Yeah.
They're just a really fantastic set of, surprisingly fantastic set of people.
Just a really good group. And she had a passion for how does O'Neill Steel get better? What does that mean?
And that was what attracted you to it, because you're saying, hey, look, data, been doing
Exactly.
it, like it. I spent a lot of years in finance, so I absolutely understand when you find yourself applying your talents to something that seems at the very best menial, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so she's like, hey, look, come over here. We don't know what you're going to do, but we know data is important. And so I'm guessing that's the mid-late 90s?
No, 2006.
2006. Okay, so data is actually getting to the point where
we had just implemented a new ERP system, and they had a massive amount of data and had no idea what to do with it.
Yeah, that's when, so the mid-2000s was when we began to have the ability to really store and have a lot of information around huge amounts of data, right? So pretty funny meme in that world was we stored it and had no idea what to do with it, and then a lot of times we still are, right? We're keeping it, but what do we do with it?
Yeah.
So what about you, Wes? When you a young, energetic Wes Spencer gets introduced to the metals industry, what was that process like?
Yeah, so I graduated college in 2007.
Not Auburn, I hear.
No, not Auburn.
No?
Thankfully not. But I did spend the dark ages in Tuscaloosa, so 03 through 07. I think it was the lowest 4-year winning percentage in Alabama football history.
Those are good years. I remember those.
Yeah, we bled for the team. So got out of college in 2007, went to work in the financial services business for 2 years, 3 years. And as you might imagine, ended up hating that just about the time the market crashed in 08-09. So really just a great time to decide upon a career change. And coincidentally, I was with a friend's dad fishing in probably March of 09. So maybe timed the bottom by a day or two. And he's like, you're doing the wrong job. I was like, oh no. Like
fishing?
I was like, what do you have in store for me? And he was like, well, if you're serious about making a career change, I think you should come talk to me. I was like, it is a tough time to be making a career change. I need to...
There was a lot of volatility during that time.
Oh, my gosh. And so about that time, I went and saw an industrial psychologist on my own dime, which was not a small investment at that point in time for a 25-year-old. And he confirmed, he's like, I think you're doing the wrong thing. And I said, well, great, what does that mean? And he gave me 3 names to talk to. 3 big industrialists here in Birmingham. Got a chance to go meet with all 3 at a time where I didn't realize how lucky I was to sit down with, leaders of Altec, leaders of McWane, Bill Jones at O'Neill Steel. And really what became very clear to me was that the whole economy in the world was facing something it had never faced. And you had these huge, approaching 100-year-old companies who were all saying the same thing. We're not doing anything now with people. That includes bringing people on. Unfortunately, it was the other, letting people go.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be that way forever. Please stay in touch.
Okay.
And so about a year later, I got a call from Cindy Persall. And she said, hey, we have your resume on file. Would you like to come in and have a discussion? And so I did. And that led to a job. And and then I'm darkening Stephen's door an hour.
Who did you interview with first? Do you remember?
Unofficially Bill.
Okay.
But then it was Norm, Jody, and Gary Gray.
Okay.
That was the 3. Unfortunately, that moved quickly. Felt like it moved, 3 or 4 week period of time, and then got a chance to come aboard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll start with you on this one, Wes. When you come into that world, and we've already established day one, Excel. Give us a view, call it 45, 60, maybe 90 days, where you began to believe, okay, I know a little bit about the metals industry, right? You're starting to learn something, and something caught you off guard. What about the metals industry kind of surprised you walking into it?
What surprised me? I would say just how clever and smart some of the people were when it came to problem solving.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still don't think the metals industry gets presented the same problem 2 days in a row.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different flavor of the same problem. It doesn't, repeat, but it rhymes. And watching some really smart people think on their feet about how to go solve a problem that may be a machine is down, a truck is delayed, how do I cut this part, what price should it be? Watching people think on their feet was pretty impressive.
What about you, Stephen? What surprised you when you came into the metals industry?
For me, I think it comes down to it's a really simple business.
Okay.
At the core, it's very simple. You buy inventory, you hold inventory, and you ship it out. But to execute it properly, it is extremely difficult. The room or the margin for error is very thin in a commodities business. And it just blew me away how simple it was, but at the same time, so precise you had to be. You had to be, because you were competing with people that are selling the same product that you're selling. And one mistake can be magnified in terms of we buy too much inventory and it sits on the floor, you have not enough and you miss an opportunity. And so it was really that idea that it was, the analogy I heard early on was it's as easy as pie. It's pricing, inventory, and expenses.
Right.
And it really is that simple, but it's incredibly complex in terms of execution.
Yeah, in software engineering, we have a thing that we like to say, which is things that are simple but not easy. And it kind of strikes me as that. So in asking you those questions, it's kind of interesting, Wes, because you're talking about, hey, I learned that it's different problems every day.
Mm-hmm.
And Stephen, talking to you, it's like it's simple, but it's not easy, right? There's this commodity platform where you're housing, moving this material, and it's not easy, right down in the depths of it. It's very, very hard to get right and very hard to do well. And just in my short time, it's very hard for companies to have longevity, right, doing it if you don't do it well. So companies absolutely separate themselves somewhere in those details throughout that industry. And I always find it fascinating when I'm dealing with a company that works in the details like that, the kinds of problems that people are solving. Very nuanced, very difficult, and often have a lot of unintended consequences if you solve them in a way that doesn't work for everyone. And I would suspect in the metals industry, much like some of the industries I've been involved with, that makes people sometimes resistant to change, not because they are afraid of change, not because of whatever else, but because it simply doesn't work for what they're trying to achieve on an everyday, every single day in, day out, eat, breathe, sleep, their set of problems. So I would be curious, and maybe Stephen will start with you on this. When you came in, and the reason we're talking is because you've done some things different in the metals industry in your career. Mm-hmm. And there had to be a moment where you came in and you thought, wow, this is simple but not easy, right? There's a lot here, and I believe something could change to our advantage. What was kind of that moment where you started thinking down the path of, I think there's some things around here that could change to our advantage, and made you kind of, what lit that fuse for you?
That is a great question, and I will start. The very first thing early in the career was, and I think, Wes, you alluded to it in terms of really smart people solving problems. We had all this information, and as I was able to start freeing up that information and serve it up to people, the appetite for that information just kept growing.
They were
hungry, and as soon as, to Wes's point, they're smart people that are making hard decisions, and they're problem solving every day. And if I could make that a little bit easier, the appetite just continued to grow. And so I was pleasantly surprised of the appetite internally of, if we can find a way to give them something different, they will consume it. They will use it, and they will use it to get better at what they do. And so that was really the first little light bulb that said, it's not, yes, it's people are fearful of change, generally speaking. And I wasn't that familiar with this industry, and I've grown to learn it's really fearful at times. But internally to the company, people were okay with change. I would give them something, say, here's a different way to look at this customer base. And they'd go, wow, give me more. Hey, here's a way to look at on-time delivery. Wow, give me more. So it was really this internal appetite to make their lives easier that was just refreshing. So, I wasn't fighting the battle.
Well, in those moments when you were first coming in, so the way you described it, you came into the organization kind of with this data mandate. And as you got down into the weeds on that, you found that giving people data, they wanted it. And just giving them the tool, they would begin to arrive at new or different ways of looking at things because the data existed in a way it had not before. Is that fair?
That's fair. I think the key that really changed for us was, at first, I was serving them up data. I was telling people, here's information. What do you need? And I was serving it back. Really, Wes, when you came in was when we were developing tools within Excel where people had access to get the data themselves. They could ask the questions, and that's really where it took off.
Would that have been PAR?
It was right after PAR. It was when we started doing what we called the sales cubes. And you could extract data into Excel, into an Excel pivot table. And the people in our company learned how to do pivot tables that, in 2006 couldn't even open Excel. I mean, they were desperate because they were after the information. But we developed an in-house customer profitability tool, activity-based costing tool, with the whole mindset of, as long as we're 80% right, this information will be valuable to our people.
I think I want to come back to that 80% number. I think we will revisit that number a couple of times. Wes, what about you when you're coming into the metals industry, right? You have a bit of the benefit that Stephen has actually been in this same company, kind of somewhat paving the way. People are familiar with some of the kind of directions of this stuff. What to you was the moment where you're like, okay, I think some things can and should change to make us better at our jobs?
Yeah, it probably took me much longer. So my first 4 or 5 years were in sales and sales management roles. And really when I got into sales management, I think what I remember hearing from our salespeople, but really our customers, was the need and the opportunity O'Neill Steel had to invest in equipment. And as that drum started getting beaten louder and louder and louder, we had an organizational shift in about 2015, and I moved from a sales management role, which is exactly what it sounds like, just very commercially focused, and got put into an opportunity to essentially lead a commercial and quasi-operational effort to go rebuild our processing, our value-add go-to-market strategy, which had 1 foot in the commercial side and 1 foot in the operational side of the business for, gosh, that was the last 4 or 5, maybe 6 years of my career at O'Neill.
How far into this was your career?
4 or 5. So it was halfway through.
You've been there some time.
So it took me 4 or 5 years to be like, oh my gosh. And I think what had happened at that time, laser cutting technology had been, call it stagnant, until it wasn't. And then all of a sudden, remember, fiber lasers came on the market. And we were on the cusp of really reinvesting in the business, but it was not going to be in the same patterns that we typically had in the past, where oxy-fuel cutting, plasma, all of a sudden fiber lasers are out, and they're making huge strides in how fast they cut, how clean they cut, but it also drove with it a ton of need for automation and material handling. So buying a laser was not just buying a laser. It was also buying a piece of automation technology, perhaps, that was just as much as the laser. And so that really presented a new but pressing need to understand, how does this change the business? Do we move forward this way or not? And that was really kind of where my eyes started to open in terms of how much the manufacturing industry, which the metals industry serves front and center, was changing.
Yeah, it's really fascinating to me. As a guy who spent, at this point, 30 years writing software for a lot of different people, when people talk about innovation, so this research that I kind of cited at the top of the recording here, I went through and I looked, people talk about the metals industry and innovation. And when people talk about innovation, they almost always nowadays are talking about software. And I think that's really not, it doesn't cover everything you should be covering when you're talking about the metals industry, because the metals industry is an incredibly innovative industry. I went to FabTech last year for the first time, and I kind of got immersed in what was going on in the world. And when you talk about these machines, ways of bending, cutting, shaping, forming, whatever it is, metal, the innovation is through the roof. It is a very normal thing in this industry to innovate. It just isn't always software. And so I think there's been a disconnect in how we talk about statistically innovation being software, right? Which is not always the case. It's just another tool in the bag. And something you were saying, Stephen, earlier is, hey, I gave some folks a tool and they actually started just using the tool. It needs to be the right tool.
Exactly.
And so what I think is interesting, I want to come back to that 80% number that you were talking about. What you said was get it right 80% of the time. And I find in software that is different from the metals industry is software is a very malleable thing. You can get it wrong and fix it tomorrow in software. You can't always do that when you cut a piece of metal, right? You have a very precision-oriented world. You've talked about, oh my goodness, it's commodity-based. I'm living in very, very, very narrow details and tolerances. And in software, we don't always share that. So what is your take on getting it right 80% of the time? How does perfect become the enemy of good in some of those worlds where honestly you do have to have part of your job where you're perfect or you're just not doing it?
Well, I think, just taking a quick step back, because as we started this, we talked about change in an industry that is adverse to change, basically.
Yeah, right.
But when it comes to like warehouse capabilities in terms of processing equipment, even automation techniques, this industry is hungry for it and adapts it, right off the bat.
Yeah.
It's the back office functions, the corporate and the interface between suppliers, customers, and distributors that really is where's that adversity to change. And so we have historically been in an environment where we are accepting change in the warehouse, but precision matters. We can't be 80% right when you send a part to somebody. Right. It's got to be perfect. And so maybe that is what slows us down in other areas of the business going, well, if it's not 100% right, it won't work. But the reality is when it comes to data and making decisions off data, I don't think you have to be perfect.
Right.
If what we said when we did this activity-based costing tool, our people would say, well, that's not exactly right, because I'm like, okay, but is this customer one of the worst you have based on this information? Well, yeah. Okay, well, let's do something different.
So the outcome is still true.
Exactly.
Okay.
It might be that we've added a little bit too much cost or not enough in this area, but is it close enough for you to make a decision or do something differently with how you manage that account? Yes. Okay, we'll do it. Don't wait till we get it 100% right. Mm-hmm. If it's good enough to make a decision and do something differently, let's do it. Mm-hmm. And that takes a lot of coaching and comfort level with people, that it's okay. If we do that and we make a mistake, it's okay. We'll just go back and
we'll refocus.
It.
Yeah, we'll unmake it.
Where in the warehouse, if you cut it wrong, you can't redo it.
Right.
You have to start over. And so, that could be part of the reason why in the office functions, people are a little more hesitant to make change.
So I would be curious then in that process, if we accept, and I think holistically we should, the metals industry is an innovative industry. Mm-hmm. It's full of people, to your point, Wes, who solve problems every single day. They solve a different problem every single day, right? That is core to innovation, right? And evolution of an organization. But when you come to the back office moments, right, you come to these moments where I'm introducing Excel, or I'm introducing data, or I'm introducing, in the case, Wes, that you and I work together on, I'm introducing software to someone who, honestly, Wes, you've said this to me, they want to be out there making the sparks fly, right? Mm-hmm. There's a job that they have. It's metals industry's job, and this back office part of it may not be where we're as comfortable with change. Where in the worlds that y'all have lived in, I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. For anyone listening, I can use the word y'all. Okay, but in the worlds that y'all have lived in together, what made you believe that things could change? And at what point did you think, and I'm the person to make that drive forward?
Stephen.
Well, the moment I realized that was really the biggest eye-opener for me, I became responsible for our IT group in somewhere around 2010.
So you inherited a group.
I inherited an organization, mm-hmm. and the first thing I did when I took over that organization was to simply say, how much are we spending and what are we spending it on? Mm-hmm. And are those the things we should be spending it on? And so we have this pool of money, and I put together a team of cross-functional, from operations to finance to our supply chain team, get this group together, and over the course of months, really honed in on, from the business perspective, what should IT be spending their dollars on? And it came down to three things. It was keeping the lights on, obviously, keeping the ERP system running, keeping everything up and going. The second one was data, analytics, information. We have to continue to give information to our people. And the last one was customer experience.
Okay.
How do we make it easier for our customers to do business with us? And what struck me is we had a gentleman at the time in supply chain who was the most anti, customer-facing technology, didn't want to do it, thought it was going to. And through that process, he recognized that, you know what? My buyers gravitate to our suppliers that have better interfaces with technology.
So
and it was this light bulb of, if he's willing to accept that we can do this, we can get everybody else. If he's willing to open his eyes to what can be done for
so
the
you
customer
found this
experience,
person, that's my
I just saw it,
canary in the
and
coal mine.
it resonated with me. Like, if he can change, we can all change. And I'm not going to say I was, I'm not the guy that did it, but I certainly believed in it early. And we built a whole bunch of people that bought into it. And, you said it early. It has to be changed from the inside.
Yep.
We had to do the pick and shovel work of convincing every single person that this was the right thing to do.
That's fascinating. I'm going to come back to be thinking about the allies specifically. We're going to come back to that because I'm really curious to hear when you talk about, I found a person who modeled the change I wanted to see, and that may have, what patterns did you witness and stuff. So Wes, given that you came in, you said, hey, there's room for change here. There's people solving these problems. You've already been surprised. You're 4 years in, right? You're like, man, things could change. How did you decide where to start? What was the trigger for you to say, hey, I'm going to start doing something different here?
I had a great boss at the time. And his advice was just put one foot in front of the next. And don't be so narrow-minded and short-sighted to not, expand once you get moving. So that helped. I think when I realized there was really an opportunity, it was probably a year in to that second effort of, we're going to be investing in equipment, investing in technology. And what happened was O'Neill Industries gave O'Neill Steel a ton of support to modernize the warehouse. And, salespeople, if you build it, they will come. The customers will come. And what happened was salespeople were right. I mean, the customers started responding to the new capabilities that O'Neill Steel had to offer. And one of the things that I realized I had taken my eye off the ball on, or perhaps not appropriately considered, to Stephen's point earlier, what are the back office and administrative tools needed to make the investments in the warehouse?
Capitalize on those.
How do you not become the bottleneck for the piece of equipment that's, several $1 million in expense that needs to be running, needs to be making sparks, needs to be generating value, and all of a sudden, the bottleneck shifted. So it's like, oh gosh, I'm in a position where I have to go solve this problem and get a team of people around me to help me understand what's out there. There was no other choice.
Yeah, so we have at this point, and to this point in the story, your stories have not collided into kind of the thing that leads us to where we are today. And I've got Stephen now who is saying, hey, I've inherited IT, got some experience with getting people used to taking in data. I've got them on Excel, right? They can do some things themselves. I think one of the most important moments you said earlier was they were able to ask their own questions, right? And that's something that people miss sometimes. If you're the one always providing the questions and the answers, you're never going to be as effective as when people can ask their own questions and get their own answers. Sure. And so you've kind of moved down that path. You've got an IT group. Wes, you're saying, hey, I'm a couple years in now. I'm seeing this shop. We've got some new equipment. We have some capital investments in this equipment. And I think that, hey, I'm looking around the world and thinking, wow, I really want to capitalize on this equipment and this investment and make sure that we're using it as much as we can. Okay, so I will ask both of you this, answer separately if you need to. When did you know it was going to be hard? I love the pregnant pause there.
No, yeah. And to be clear, the periods of time are a little off from what we're describing.
5 years async.
So where Wes is 2015 to 2016, it's a different organization at that time versus 2010 to 2012 when we were first starting to use technology. I don't think I ever thought it would be easy. So it wasn't a surprise.
You kind of came in thinking, hey, I'm ready for this
change
fight.
is hard.
Yeah.
Change is incredibly difficult, whether it's a very small change or whether it's a huge change, which is what we're talking about is bringing, our customer experience and how we interact with customers to change it. So I never expected it would be easy.
So you kind of walked in knowing I'm going to roll up my sleeves.
It's just easy. I am fascinated and always have enjoyed the politics of driving change or politics of getting decision done. And I think politics get a bad name because of the environment we live in.
Sure.
But to me, politics is, okay, I need to go figure out who the influential people in the organization are, and I've got to go to them first. And so we found a GM, a general manager at the time, that really he was forward thinking. He wanted technology. And so we'd go to him and talk to him about how he can use technology to make his branch better. Okay, so he adopts it. Then you go to different points in the organization and you find those people to be your champion.
So you're setting out to find those folks, right? And these are just allies in change. What was the process for you when you're kind of setting out to find these folks? What do you look for?
Well, I had the benefit of I'd been in the organization. We'd gone through a process of PAR, this activity-based costing. So through that process of implementing that tool over the course of a couple of years, I got to meet a lot of people. And the questions were either very defensive or they were very positive. And so you start with the people that are very positive, like, okay, yeah, how can I use this to make this decision better? So I had the benefit of 3 or 4 years under my belt in the organization and had already known.
And you were already driving some
change. I could
change.
already see who those people would be to make, to get the decision. Now, those people are different than the people that you have to convince in the organization to help get the investment. And so you're playing that game of, okay, I need this set of people to help convince our executive team to invest money in it. And I've got a different set of people that help adopt it throughout the organization.
So change, I think what I'm hearing there is change is a really social event for you and being effective at that. Hey, I've got some allies. I went and found those people. I had a small change I can make. Well, relatively small. Not undermining the value of the original change, but you came in knowing you're going to do some data and you're going to get people. And once you got that moving, you found some people very receptive to that. And you said, hey, I'm gonna tag them because later when we make a bigger change, I'm gonna go talk to them about it.
And the way to think about that is the entire time you're building credibility. Somebody told me early on, everything you do or interaction with somebody, you're either building credibility or tearing down your credibility. And so when that next change came about, thankfully I'd built up some credibility and I was able to cash in a lot of those chips and got the benefit of the doubt in certain circumstances.
What about you, Wes? When did you know it was going to be? And again, I want to respect Stephen. We are talking about different timelines here. They will collide, right? But we are currently still talking about Wes coming into a different organization. Wes probably is coming into an organization that already has Stephen knowing who the allies are, where those players live, and kind of probably has a vision on some of the changes Wes is walking into on day one when Wes says, hey, let's talk about this Excel thing. So Stephen probably already had a vision for, wow, I know where some of this is going. And now, Wes, you know that very early on, Stephen was saying, is this guy going to be defensive with change or is he going to be someone who runs with it? So Wes, when did you know in the process of making the changes that you were making that things were going to kind of be difficult? You needed to roll up your sleeves. And then what were some of the humans, you said your boss earlier, right? Said put one foot in front of the other. So who were some of the humans that you found were kind of allies and how did you locate them?
Yeah, a lot in this answer and a lot in the question. Amazing question. When did I know it was going to be hard? I think the first time I knew it was going to be hard, I was probably on the tail end of an Excel bender that might have been 3 or 4 days using Stephen's tools to come to the recommendation that we need to make an investment in a new piece of equipment. And for all these reasons that all the data could support, and it was a big investment, and it was exciting, it would take us into new places, and it was just going to be obvious that we should do this, and this would be rubber stamped, and we would just move forward just because I had done the homework and presented the information. Well, to Stephen's point earlier, call it politics or just call it justification. There's competing priorities for capital, right? There's an entire department of people who don't focus on the things that I was focusing on, or multiple departments, and they had compelling things that they needed resources to go do. And so when I was like, this is so obvious, and their answer is like, yes, it is. And it's also obvious, the other things in this business over here that need investment, that need attention. Ooh, gosh, right you are. This is going to be harder than I thought. And so I think, to Stephen's point, what that really drove was some coaching to me from the COO at the time, a guy named Mitchell Harrison, and probably piggybacking, Stephen, on what you guys had done through PARS, like, go find an ally. And, one, check your assumptions, but two, start seeing if they are seeing what is obvious to you. And if they are, they'll share it and they'll give you some support. And if they're not, then you probably need to charge less hard. But that's when I knew it was going to be hard. But yeah, the importance of getting people to kind of listen, be receptive, help you polish what you thought was just a crisp and crystal clear justification. You're never as right as you think you are at the beginning.
Yeah, so you're both talking about allies, and both of you know the organization that you're in and probably have some similar names in mind. But give me an example between the two of you, no names, right? But when you say an ally really helped, someone that just stood out, what were some of the activities, what were some of the actions that person took that was like, okay, that was a super help, that someone probably may not even have realized they were helping your cause? What was a moment when you're like, oh my gosh, that was so helpful? Right, Wes, in your case, is it someone saying, nah, dude, you're way, way out in left field on this? It can be someone telling you to hold up, right? It can be someone being a social representative, right? What were some of the things y'all saw that were people could be helpful?
Another tough question.
Well, I think from my perspective, it's simply using the tools that were provided.
So trying the thing.
Trying the thing and giving honest feedback. This worked, this didn't work, but willing to try. And once they started seeing value out of it, while we have an extremely large organization, we have a very close organization, and people talk. And we have a very strong, I've heard it said, we have one of the strongest grapevine networks in an organization. So as soon as somebody found value in a tool, they would start talking about it.
Yeah.
And then other people would go, well, how did you get that? How did you make that decision? And so it kind of organically feeds on itself. But getting people willing to just try it.
Just try it. I
try.
have, in my career, found that to be, you said a couple of things there, being willing to try it, and then being willing to give honest feedback. Don't say it worked if it didn't work.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And that's part of the process.
Yeah.
And so drawing into that, there comes a point when we are talking about back office software. There comes a point when we're talking about these allies exist in the organization. There's been some amount of time where, hey, technological change is occurring. It's not a machine, right, out on the floor. It's technological change is now occurring in the back office. So when does the collision happen with y'all, the two of you specifically, saying, okay, what I'm intuiting here is Wes is one of these people who will try something.
Absolutely.
And now we have a collision moment where the two of you are on a course to say, let's change something together. When did that become a reality, that you two were working on the same thing at the same time, whether you knew it or not?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, as soon as I got put into the processing role, which would have been 2015, you were president in 2014. So, I mean, a huge amount of everything that I did went to my boss, who was the VP of operations, but ultimately through Stephen. So as soon as I was in that role, it was very much on Stephen's radar what was going on. I think where it became really front and center had to have been, we had been 2 or 3 years into the equipment spree investment, and the allies, for lack of better words, who had helped us commercially say, yes, we need this equipment, we were struggling to serve them. And what I mean by that is they said, look, if you put the equipment in, we can go get the business to fill it up. And they did, right? And they got the opportunities. The problem was the administrative function, or just the churn of those inbound opportunities, the basic quoting and estimating, which rolled up to my team, we were struggling to make good on what we needed to do for those champions out in the field, for lack of better words. They brought in the opportunities, and we were struggling to meet reasonable response time. We were struggling to present information in a way to them that was quick and consumable for them and their customers. And that's probably the real convergence, was how did we go about solving that problem? Because we were in some thrash for probably the better part of 3 or 4 months where we were just struggling to keep up. And I hate to think about how much revenue we left on the table, even for a quarter, but we left a lot of money on the table.
So is this a result of, hey, we've gotten we've got a capital investment, right? We've increased our capacity at one end of the pipe. And the reality is doing things the way you did them won't get you to twice of what you used to do. And you have a moment where you're saying, wow, from a back office standpoint, I have got to find ways to unlock more potential here, just like we found in the warehouse, right? We unlocked it in the warehouse with machines, whatever that is, but now I've got to unlock here. And so you have this thrash that you're feeling, Wes, and eventually is now rolling up to you, Stephen. So you've been moved into a president role at this point. And together, y'all are saying, we do, I'm assuming, Stephen, you acknowledged, yes, that is an issue. We do need to solve it.
Correct.
Yeah, so there's a 3 or 4 month period where y'all are like, we really do need to solve this thing. And how do you arrive at the moment where there's a realization that, yep, let's go solve it together. Let's make it real. We've got a set of allies. Stephen, it sounds like you've done a good job of prepping the organization for some change management.
Right. And just to back up a year before that happens, when I got the role of president, we were going through a very difficult period in our industry. You come out of the financial impact in 2008-9. While there was a more global recovery early on, the manufacturing industry did not recover in the early 2011-12. It was a very difficult period. And a lot of our people were starting to say things like, well, we're changing, and we never used to change. We never used to do these things. Why, all this change. And so we realized we had to get the business open-minded back, to change, because they were scared. Things were happening. Layoffs had happened in 2008-9, not only to us, but in a lot of manufacturing businesses. And so we went through a process of really defining what culture we wanted. And I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we settled on 3 things, which was first, legacy, honoring our past, recognizing that, we were successful. We were at 90 plus years at that point. And we need to honor that and respect our founders of what they wanted to be, but also at the same time, talk about all the change that our company had been through over that 90 years. We weren't the same company that we started with. Then we talked about accountability, because we had been a very paternalistic organization for a while, and people needed to understand why we were having to make difficult decisions. And so we had to be accountable not only to ourselves, but to each other and to our shareholders and our founders. And then the last one was adaptability around we can have to change. So we went through that, and we did a great job. I think our company all bought into it. A couple years after that, we realized I added a 4th circle, and that 4th circle was technology. We had to use technology to make our lives easier, to solve problems. We had to think about technology, and we couldn't have an IT person or somebody sitting in the corner office thinking about. We had to bubble those things up and bring those things to the forefront. And I'll never forget, I was really close to the VP of Ops that Wes is talking about, but we were both in agreement. If we've invested all this, we have to find a technology solution. There has to be something out there to get us better. And send Wes off, go find it, go help us get better. And I'll never forget y'all have been through months and months of demos and everything, but sitting in the boardroom and you presented it. And like 5 minutes in, we were like, why are we still talking? Yes, go do that. And that was the point to me. You have this technology of this processing capability that starts intersecting with customer experience technology that we had invested in for years. And that's where, to me, that first light bulb starts to go off of, wait a minute, what do we have here?
So you're sitting in a boardroom, and this is like lightning.
Yes.
Right. And you're like, oh my goodness, things are going to change. I can feel that. Wes, what was that experience like for you?
Nerve-wracking. So, to get to that point, that was in October. I remember it pretty vividly. That was in October. We had gone through a trial of a product called SecturaFab, which, now Stella Source supports. And there really weren't comps on the market for what it was, right? Quoting and estimating fabricated metal was a hodgepodge of tools. You went to nesting software, you went to ERPs, and by God, everybody smashed it all into Excel, right? And that was just a process that did not scale. So we come across SecturaFab, and it helps consolidate and streamline and simplify enough without sacrificing the key elements of where we need to maintain precision, just how to quote. And so there's nothing on the market like it. We're super interested, and we're at this impasse with the sales guy at the time. And it's like, look, man, I need to trial this product. Like, this just doesn't, there's a comma, almost 2 commas
Sure.
in your proposal, which we worked them back off of, but like, this doesn't happen without trying it.
Yeah.
So we get our hands on it. They spin us up a pretty quick instance of an account for us. In the very first quote that went through the pipes on a Friday afternoon, we got the order simply because we responded quickly. And that was when I was like, is this coincidence?
Now, did you get the order that day?
We got the order that fast.
So let's draw back to that, right? I don't want to miss that, right? This is why Steven is like, this was lightning, right?
So he didn't know about it yet.
I don't know about this.
No,
part.
but when he sees it in the boardroom later, I've already heard, like, this is lightning. Well, this is what you're talking about, right? So,
Yes.
So you come in, you're like, hey, I want to demo this thing. You're building the ally system that Steven's been talking about. I need someone who will try it. So you found someone.
Yep.
Someone who will try it. Someone who will give great feedback. You get it in front of someone, they try it, and you see results then, right? Immediately you see results.
Yeah, the very first quote we ran through the system that would have taken probably 3 or 4 hours. We were able to accomplish. This is day one, so there's no practice. We were able to complete it in about 15 minutes. Probably could have worked it down to 3 or 4, returned it to the customer, and within 10 minutes of returning it to a customer, they gave us an order because, one, we responded quickly, and we were able to respond quickly also with a quick delivery. So we get this $3,000 or $4,000 order.
For 20 minutes of work at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at that point in time, I was like, okay, we really could have something. Created a champion on my team. I said, I don't want you to be anything normal.
Now, was this the same person who had done the initial one, or is it
Yeah.
different? It is? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a great individual on our team who just took a learning stance towards everything and said, look, I don't care what you don't do normal course of business. I want everything that you do to run through this system. And anything
So now
that
you're putting some stress on the system. I want to see it work.
Yeah, just tell me what it can do and tell me what it can't. So that worked probably 6 weeks. We really did a great level of justification, probably too much, and God mighty, did we over-rehearse the pitch. Because Steven was like, 3 minutes in, why are we still talking?
Yeah.
I'll never forget, Tate's like, oh, why this long?
Yeah.
This is the part where you tell
They've
me.
been waiting on it.
Yeah.
They've been hungry
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, so we did all that, and we got to, the hard part, which was implementation. Now we got change management.
Right. It's not one person who's super receptive. Now it's potentially people who were more defensive, to your point earlier.
And remember, everyone is smarter than me on this team. This is a team of really smart people.
Yeah.
And so the reasons that they had for what they were doing, why they were doing it that way, they're all real.
Sure.
But we were about to go up in that.
So now take me through the moment Wes leaves the room, does this presentation. You know there's something there. Sounds like other people in the room did too. Was there a moment there where you thought, okay, we've got something in the bottle here, and this is going to be a moment of success? Did you feel like there was success, or did you feel like there was a long road before you would start seeing success from that?
No, I thought it was going to be immediate.
Yeah.
I really did.
And Wes probably walked out with every bit of that pressure.
Yeah, he did.
There's a key part, Stephen, that I don't know if you remember in that pitch. And I actually went through this last night. Like I've still got the old email accounts and everything like that. I went through it last night. Included in that pitch was make a standalone investment in Secure Fab to use it for our team. And also there was a line item on the quote, do we integrate with ERP? And we were looking at a major ERP decision in at about that time. And in the boardroom, it was like, hey, we can move forward with this, but wait, there's more. We can do the ERP integration.
Yeah.
It can do processing it can empower all those things. And I thought that swinging for the fence was like the right thing to do there. And you were like, I get it. But those resources right now are going there. So if you want to move forward and find a way to be successful and do it quickly, which doesn't necessarily include the ERP integration and all those things. That was like the biggest godsend that we didn't understand at the time.
Yeah.
That enabled us just to get moving.
Yeah, so let me walk. I don't want to miss that point, right? So you come in and you're like, hey, ERP integrations, which, this is the business we're in. We hear that a lot. And we've done 130 plus of these ERP integrations, right? It's a thing that I see a lot of. And Stephen, you see that, and you also know probably broader view, road mapping and things like that are going on. Wes has lightning in a bottle, you know that. And now your job becomes, let's get them moved forward on the thing, and let's not let perfect be the enemy of better. And that sends Wes, because you said, I think it's going to be successful immediately. You felt good right away.
Yes.
And Wes, now you walk out of that room with Steven is now supporting this because he knows you've got to move forward with go do more of the thing you're doing, but don't let something stop you.
Yeah. And to be precise, what I knew immediately was it was going to solve the bottleneck problem that we had.
Yeah, sure.
Which was we had a quoting bottleneck and we couldn't get those resources. We couldn't respond to our customers fast enough.
Yep.
Did I see a glimmer in the Pronto integration? And yes.
Yeah.
But that was, I'm not going to sit here and say I saw that as a home run day one. What I saw as a home run day one was it can solve our problem immediately if we can figure out how to unlock it.
To you, it was
quickly.
a slay the dragon in front of you moment.
Exactly.
And let's get that figured out. And yes, we can talk about a million other things, but let's get that figured out. So Wes, did that translate to you in that moment? Did you actually get that sense?
What I remember was knowing that it was well received in the moment. And, sometimes like the biggest moment of fear is like, I got what I want. Oh no!
Oops.
So we had greased the pipes on greased the rails with Sectura Fab at the time. It's like, hey, this may move. This may be one of those things that goes gradually, and then suddenly, and it went suddenly. But fortunately, we had kind of an onboarding plan with them that got moving. I would say 2 days later, and moved very, very quickly, which allowed us to not lose momentum. Kept me very, very busy, kind of getting all the cost drivers, all the rules, all the things that go into setting up something like this set up quickly. And then we transitioned, I don't know, in like 4 or 5 weeks, including a holiday, to implementation and go live.
So we've got Steven who says, hey, I feel some success. I'm eliminating, there's a problem directly in front of us that we've been talking about for some amount of time, a couple months, 3 months, and we've eliminated it. Wes, when did you start to feel success from bringing this thing into the organization? When did you begin to feel that you were being successful in that?
Gosh, it was not immediate.
Yeah.
The initial, all the things that we thought we had cornered from a change management standpoint, those were met with resistance day one. Day one. My first probably 4 or 5 weeks leading that team was probably reviewing every single quote every single day and talking to at least half the team. Is there anything you were unable to quote using the software? And then diving into how real is that? Or is that training? Is that, a philosophical way to handle a quote? Or is it truly just, no, the software doesn't meet that need? So that was a long 4 or 5 weeks, I'll tell you that. But there was a moment, we had I won't get close on the numbers. We probably had ballpark, let's just call it, let's call it we had 200 quotes a day coming in. We were able to quote previously 30, 40 quotes a day. It was just, we were drowning. And it was the end of a week, it was on a Friday, and we managed a lot of our inbound opportunities through just an Outlook inbox. It was a kind of a global inbox. And we gauged how busy we were based on how many unattended to quotes were in the inbox. And again, when you're getting 150, 200 in per day, that's a pretty high number you're looking at. And I remember on a Friday, we were probably 5 or 6 weeks into the change management piece. It got down to 9. And I was like, either the economy is shut down, the outbox is broken, or the inbox is broken, or something is working. And then I started looking at the dashboards and how much people had quoted. I was like, whoa, we're kind of blowing through major new high watermarks on how much people have quoted. I'm kind of checking in with the team one by one, because at the time, the team was fairly distributed. We had people in Indianapolis or Shelbyville, Indiana, Nashville, Mobile, Dallas. It's like, oh my gosh, the tool worked. Like they cranked out the quotes today. I was like, that's a high watermark. And then every day beyond that was a new high watermark.
Did you find in that time that some people who were resistant to change became more accepting of it, or did it take time for them to begin to feel the results?
You can't deny some of the results. We had one person who put out 39 quotes in a day.
And that was not a normal thing.
The team might not have done 39 quotes in a day. So that data points like that you just can't argue with. But the team was great. I was pretty unpopular for a while. I remember I'd probably just watched The Hunt for Red October, but I flashed a scene of Cortez crossing the ocean.
Oh, yeah.
And Cortez got to the New World. He burned the ships. He said, we are not going back. And I actually had a picture of ships on fire when I addressed the team. I was like, guys, I know it's been rough. Like, this is not an option.
Yeah, we're going forward.
We are not going back.
Yeah.
And there's some really smart people who looked at me like I had 3 heads and spoke Spanish, which I don't. And I said, guys, I'm not trying to be rude. This is not an ego thing. This is existential. We're doing this.
Yeah.
And one of those individuals came to me probably 4 weeks, 5 weeks later, and was like, I understand the route we took, because had we not gone that level of commitment, we probably never would have fully let go of what we were doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it forced us to really prioritize what are the things in our process that must be preserved.
Sure.
And what are we willing to let go of?
I think that's an interesting point. And Stephen, I'll come back to you on this. So Wes, Stephen's like, oh my God, this is going to be great. Mm-hmm. Wes has to go do it. And so
exactly.
There's an amount of weeks
I had the easy
there.
part.
Yeah, you're like, I completely believe Wes is going to get this knocked out.
A team of 10 people made it happen.
Yeah, and Wes is now in a position where he's like, great, let's go out in the org, right? Wes is your ally in that moment. He's like, I'm going out in the org, let's make it happen. Got some traction. Come back to the moment when more than just y'all, but more than 2 of you have sat down now and said, this thing overall is a success. It feels successful. People are now accepting it, right? We've burned the boats. People are accepting it. And we actually want to move forward with more of this sort of technological advancement, which is a thing that I know that's how I've arrived here, right? That's a decision we want to make. So how did y'all arrive at that decision where it's like, okay, we've gotten change management is stressful. Change is stressful. We know how to do it. A lot of organizations don't. We've got it, and we want to go make more of it because we found such efficiency increases, and we found the ability to capitalize on investments we were making, right? You're making more off of the investment. So what moment did y'all have together that led to kind of that, let's move forward with software as one of our key innovation branches?
I don't know that there was a specific point in time where that happened. More like an organic over a period of time. Mm-hmm. The 2 worlds that we saw, we had a customer experience e-commerce platform that was wildly successful. People were buying material. Now we have a tool where we're able to quote processing faster and faster. You know, I used to say, well, yeah, it's taking us 15 minutes to a quote, and 14 of those are just double checking the,
measuring twice.
Yeah. And so you start just brainstorming. Okay, how did these 2 worlds collide? Mm-hmm. You know, what can we do? And I think at that same time, Wes had developed such a close relationship with the Secure Fab organization, and we were able to start having conversations like, would they entertain a more closely integrated partnership or relationship? Mm-hmm. Which did not happen overnight.
Sure.
That was a period of time of, we want to do something. No, we don't want to do something for a little while. Yeah, well, let's back off for a little bit. But it was over that time of, we just fundamentally knew that we couldn't keep doing things the way we were in terms of e-commerce. We have to develop ways that make our salespeople more efficient. Mm-hmm. And then these 2 worlds just collided, and there wasn't just me and it wasn't just Wes. We had a lot of people in the organization that saw those things and said, there is something there that can change not only who we are, but change this whole industry for the better.
Absolutely.
If they'll let it.
It's just an expanding village of folks who are participating in the bravery of change.
Exactly.
But I think the thing, too, that Stephen referenced, and to try to drive timelines to a point of singularity, the Pronto story, e-commerce launched in September 2015, something like that. It was 15-ish, I think. That was laying the groundwork for sure for imagining how can technology be bigger than just selling a piece of metal. The market responded just amazingly favorably to it. And as we really had these conversations with Secure Fab, I'm sure that we were not the only people who wanted the level of partnership that we were pitching. Mm-hmm. But what we could do is we could point to commitment in terms of Pronto. Look what the industry has been, look how the company, O'Neill Industries, has been supporting this for years. When we say we're forward-thinking technology, we've got the proof.
Yep.
And I think that really resonated. And you can imagine that the overlap in terms of how to go about doing that, really what to go do for the benefit of the industry, I think that's what resonated. And to Stephen's point, was there an aha moment? Probably not. I think the credibility and validity, to connect it back to what you said earlier, Stephen, you're either building trust or taking away from it in all your actions. And I think, fortunately, the interactions that we had with Secure Fab and that team at the time, at the most basic and at the most high level, just established credibility in the fact that we believed in something bigger than just a simple quoting and estimating tool that could benefit the industry. Because specifically, the problems that we were trying to solve, we knew were not unique to us.
Sure. So you guys just gave us a 20-year story. And I'll point out just some takeaways that I think I got from that. I think one of the interesting things is you both had a hard time pointing to specific aha moments in a lot of cases. But what you did say a lot was the consistency mattered, right? So you came in and said, we've spent 20 years working towards just being better every day, is the way I hear that. Some people are resistant to that, but it really is just be better every day. And at the end of that 20-year process, you're running into 18, 20 years at that point, you're saying, hey, look, let's make some more choices that are really built upon 15 years of choices we've already been making. And it's the practice and it's the exercise and the discipline of continuing to make those choices even when they're hard. And that evolution leads to, innovations and the kind of innovations that people talk about. Not to leave off the table the fact that people come in every day and innovate in their jobs. Mm-hmm. People talk about the bigger ones. And so to me, I think that's a really fascinating look at 20 years of consistently coming in. Stephen, you said you walked in and rolled your sleeves up day one. Yeah. And just knowing that's how it's going to go. We're going to get 80% right. We're going to get 20% wrong. We're going to fix the 20% and get 80% right tomorrow. And to me, that's a really compelling story for how you arrive at a spot when you say, when someone describes you or describes someone, your organization is innovative in a world, it didn't happen yesterday. It happened over a long period of time with a ton of allies, people who sometimes are willing to hop in, right, to your person who just jumped in and is like, I'll do it today, right? I got an order today. There's that person. Then there's the person that shows up 5-6 weeks later and is like, that was actually a pretty good idea. Yeah. And then there's the people that never really get it. Some of them hang around, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, the world is changing, the industry is changing, the company is changing, and I don't care what industry I'm talking about. So why don't you guys give me, now that we've had a 20-year conversation, why don't you tell me, and I'll ask both of you this, I'll start with you, Stephen, future look. 5 years out, 15 years out, 20 years out, where do you see us headed? What are the trends? What do you see these efficiencies, our innovations? What do you see happening in the metals industry?
I believe in my core that the metals industry will have to continue to use technology to improve the things we do, how we interact with each other, not only from a supplier to distributor, but as distributor to a customer. I believe that experience is going to have to, at some point, replicate what we feel in the B2C world. As I go and spend my night ordering things or ordering food online, whatever, I believe that same experience has to come to our industry. Has to, just because our customers will demand it, but also because we have to get more efficient at what we do. So I believe we're heading that way. To me, the question is not where we're headed, it's how long is it going to take to get there. And that's going to be up to change management across our industry. And what I've seen is, it's hard enough to change in your own industry, but to influence another company when you're not in it every day, oh my gosh, that is just a really difficult thing to do.
That could be its own podcast.
It really could be, because how do you influence? You don't know who the allies are. You don't know who the key players are. And so that is extremely difficult to influence somebody else's organization to do something or to try something or to adopt something. It's why I have no fear in not giving away, but sharing technology that makes us better. Because I think we're going to adapt it better. I think we're going to adopt it better and use it better within our organization. So it's a long-winded answer, but I think technology is here to stay. I think we're all going to use technology, not just in the warehouse, but with AI to make back office things more efficient and all those things. It's when, not
so
if.
You feel an inevitability.
It is.
There.
It's
just like gravity.
Well said.
What do you think, Wes?
Yeah. So as fortunately Stephen got to answer first, I think there's really two things that'll happen. It's what happens to those people who have a very stiff-arm, resistant approach to technology. Do all of them go out of business? No. But I think if you look at companies who have a pattern of leaning into technology and companies that don't, I think you'll see survive and thrive in one camp and hardships in another that really put those technology-resistant businesses further and further behind. And I think the pace of change is changing. It's not only, technology is not only evolving, it's evolving at an accelerating rate. And what's interesting is, we see companies of all sizes, big and small, and all shapes, fabricators, OEMs, distributors. There's no real clear indicator. We see big companies with a ton of resource just be like, no, we're good. And we see small companies with just belief. And they're like, well, we will find a way to make this work. And this product is super innovative in what we do. When you see that type of behavior in response to technology, you can just, generally speaking, kind of bet that those types of companies as a whole will do really, really well. That's 5 years, 10 years from now, what types of specific capabilities, I wish I knew. That's going to be fun.
Yeah, I agree. It will be fun. And it's interesting. Change is here to stay.
Yeah.
I think, Stephen, you did a great job earlier. We talked about, companies that are 100 years old. And when you look back at the mountain behind you instead of the one in front of you, you realize we've been changing the whole time. And does it feel uncomfortable today? Yes. But on the composite, we have to acknowledge it's necessary.
Right.
And it's what drives us to be better humans every day. And I think that it's been really interesting to hear y'all tell these stories. I really appreciate the time. I super appreciate the expertise. I want to do this again at some point. It sounds like Stephen talking about influencing organizations you're not part of is probably a master class that very few people could give.
Exactly.
I would love to hear more about that. But this has been really fascinating. This has been very interesting. I appreciate y'all. Hope that we get to do this again sometime.
Absolutely.
Likewise.
Wes, Stephen, thanks.
Thank you.